So, okay, thank you. Recording in progress. Now, where were we? We were trying to get to Rufus Jones here. If I can just get this up a little bit. Maybe if I put it on my Bible, it would be a little bit better. Rufus Jones was a minister with the Quakers. So keep that in mind, you Quakers and Mennonites and such. But as we're trying to roll along here, let's look at a couple of things. As we're moving to the whole idea of the inner light, and in my life, the inner light, I think, just makes its presence known. It's an energy, this light. It's not a light that you look at as a thing. It's an energy. It's called a light because it seems to open up the darkness or the inability to respond in the right way to the spirit in our life. So that's why it's a light. It shines on the direction to go. So earlier this week, it was raining in the morning, and it was what we call a farmer's rain. It was a nice steady rain. And we generally don't get that kind of stuff around here. So I decided that it was a good idea to go for a walk. So I put on my rain jacket, which I have and hardly ever have needed, and put on my shoes, and I walk in our path, our dirt path. And I went out walking, and what I realized was, and I didn't expect any particular thing, I just thought I'll go for a walk in the rain, was that before the sun comes, when the sun shines on a plant, the plant has a certain brilliance to it, all right? But when the rain comes down, it takes on a new depth of color. And also, everything seems to start blooming in that soft rain. And the plants, they were, I would call them shrubs, okay? Shrubs, just shrubs. I thought they were just shrubs, not very interesting. And they're all blooming with colors. Most of it was yellow, but then there was some, you might call purplish blue. And it was just a special color. And it was a beautiful walk. And I just, instead of thinking about walking, I just looked at the plants and the colors. So I let the light of God reveal to me God's shining presence in this soft rain. Then, as I started up one of the hills, it was all muddy. So my shoes started weighing about 10 pounds each with this mud that was stuck on them. And at first, of course, I said, oh, the mud, and blah, blah, blah. Then I said, don't think about it. Let it go. Is that not what we try to do, especially in the apophatic prayer, letting go of the outside stuff, our thoughts, the things bothering us out there, or even in here, inside of us. And I said, just don't pay attention to it. So they're muddy. I knocked some of it off. And I just continued to enjoy the beauty of the fields and the bushes and the color all around me. And then when I got home, I sort of cleaned it out. So I think that's one of the ways, what made me respond to, why don't I just take a walk in the rain without having any sense of what it would give me? That's what I call the inner light. And it comes, it's always in us. We don't put it in us. It's in us, as Rufus Jones would say, as Quakers would say. It's a matter of having a certain prayer of silence and stillness that allows it to be energized, maybe not at that particular moment, but at some point. So we make a reaction to the world around us. This is very much Quaker. They sit in silence and stillness and let the light energize them to respond to the world around them in an appropriate fashion. We'll get more into that. Another thing that came to me is a lot of people in recovery, say from something like alcoholism, that's just one of the things, one of the addictions in our lives, could be recovery from workaholism for that matter, from responsibilityism, where you're in charge of the world. And what I hear people say is, yeah, I'm trying not to do this addiction that I'm doing. I'm in recovery. But I'm busy now because I have more energy. I don't have this time to pray very much. And I said, think of it this way. Take the drinker. Drinker goes out at night, say on a Friday night, goes out, say by 5:30, 6 o'clock, they're drinking. They drink till midnight, and then they go home and fall down. That's 6 hours. You spend 6 hours in your addiction. What about 6 hours in silence and solitude? I couldn't possibly do that. Well, you could possibly drink yourself into oblivion. Why can't you put as much time into the inner light as you put into the darkness? Just something to keep in mind. Whenever you say you're trying to put aside something in your life, but you don't have any time for prayer, I said, what about all those hours that you spent on that thing that had hold of you? Another way in which the inner light would, then you spend enough time with it, it energizes you to be much better in the world. Now, where we are now is bad air. That's one of the reasons we're having some trouble with the internet, is we have bad air. Because of fires in California, and all the smoke is coming this way. The sun is out, but it looks like a cloudy day. I mean, you can see the sun, but you can pretty much look straight at it. It's not very bright. That's because of all the smoke. And so I think here's another way the inner light, I think, can work. At least it's working in my life. So you can say, look at this. This is terrible. I can't go out. I have to be careful, and I got all kinds of things I got to do, where it's saying you should really be indoors. Well, what happens if you were indoors and tried not to be too physical, too energetic, so you didn't breathe in too deeply? That would be a moment of silence and solitude. So, yes, the air is bad, but what does it then offer you in its place? Is an opportunity to sit and be a little bit quiet and still, which would be good for your lungs and also good for your heart. So another way, in other words, I began to look at the world because of allowing the inner light, the presence of holy, the presence of a higher power, if you're in addiction, the ultimate reality, as Thomas Keating would call it, and the creator of the universe. It's called The Inner Light by Rufus Jones, and many others, by the way. He didn't make it up. It's what his reference is. Often, I think, I wouldn't say always, but often it takes a scene and says, how can I work with this to make myself better, if not the world better? And I think that's very Quakerish, okay? Not complaining, but seeing where's the light in literally a darkness, because we have all this terrible air. So be still. And don't take long jogs today. Sit and watch this Zoom, if you can get on the internet. So another thing that came to me in terms of the inner light is something that happened yesterday. And this, again, has to do with climate. There was the women's marathon in the Olympics. For those of you who are totally unconcerned about sports, every 4 years, there's something called the Olympics. Best athletes in the world all gather together in their various sports and compete for gold, silver, and bronze, first, second, and third place medals. So there's this woman, who I never heard of, by the way, named Molly Seidel, and Wisconsin girl. a Notre Dame graduate, by the way. And last year, 2020, February, you have to go through Olympic trials in your country, the United States, and get in the top 3. And that qualifies you to go to the Olympics in Tokyo. So February of last year, she gets 3rd place. And everybody's, who's Molly Seidel? She gets 3rd place. She's going to the Olympics. Well, of course, they got canceled last year. So they have them this year. So now it's a year and a half later because she was unknown and now even forgotten. Nobody was doing a story on Molly Seidel. They did a story on the woman who came in first in the trials, who then decided to have a baby and was breastfeeding at this time. So she didn't even finish the race. And this woman, Molly Seidel, is up with the lead pack through the first half of the race, but American women are often up there and then they fade. Now and again, they stay there. But we've only had 2 women in the Olympics history ever get a medal in the marathon. So this Molly Seidel goes on and on and on. She finishes in 3rd place. Again, very surprising. Now, what's that got to do with the inner light? Well, it's got to do with the inner light revealing that what we think is yucky can really be quite helpful. The weather in Tokyo for the marathon was hot and sticky. That is very humid. And so they actually started at 6 a.m. I think the temperature was in the mid 60s and went up into the 80s by the time they finished 2.5 hours later. And muggy and everything. Molly is a Wisconsin Badger type lady. What's Wisconsin? The long summer, early fall? I know, New York. I grew up in New York. It's hot, sticky, muggy, humid. Everybody says, I don't want to live in Wisconsin. Oh, it's terrible here. I wish it was cooler. Oh, blah, blah, blah. She was bred to run in this weather. And I think of all the people trying to escape, who are training, try to escape hot, muggy weather. They go up to Flagstaff to run at altitude. It's cool, it's pleasant. They come to Boulder, which used to be cool and pleasant. Now it's got bad air. And she trains in what everybody says is yucky weather, but the Olympic marathon was run in that same weather. So all the times that she was living in those conditions, and Notre Dame's the same way. They have long, miserable summers, Indiana. So she was preparing to do well in that exact climate. Again, there's the inner light shining out. When she was 10 years old, she said she wanted to be a runner. I'll continue with her here. All right, somebody has their audio on because I can hear a dog. So you might want to check your audio. At 10 years old, this little girl, Molly Seidel, said she wanted to be a runner. That was her inner light. Now, what happened if family and friends said, oh, Molly, no, you don't want to be a runner. No, girls don't run. Oh, no, that's not, you just want to grow up to, be normal, do normal things. Why don't you go play soccer? That's what girls do. They play soccer. And she said, no, I want to be a runner. Who around her wanted to be a runner? Maybe nobody. She just wanted to be a runner. It just came to her. She's the bronze medal winner at Tokyo 2021 Olympics. So follow your dreams. It could be your inner light. So as we continue on talking about our friend Rufus Jones, the Quakers are called the Religious Society of Friends. Friends hang out together and friends do things together. You would never call my church the Church of Friends because my church is basically a church of private religion. People go to mass. Yes, if they see people they know, that's their friends, but they don't try to meet new people. They don't go to church to meet new people. Catholics basically don't do strangers in churches. We think that's somebody else's job. We're there for our little private encounter with Jesus and the host, the real presence, as we would call it. But the religious society, it's a society of friends. So they realize they are a community society and they are friends. So they don't ignore one another. You think, aren't we all sitting here in silence and solitude? Out of that comes connectivity. You can't legislate it. You can't demand it. You can't form a committee to make it happen. It happens from everybody's inner light being empowered. So its founder was a fellow named George Fox. He founded it in the 1600s in England. Well, you're dealing with Henry VIII in the 1500s and all these religious difficulties. And of course, if you were not Anglican or his religion, if you were Roman Catholic, my religion, you could get burnt at the stake. And then when the Catholics took over, they wanted to burn the Anglicans. Oh my gosh, anything but friends in that crowd. What a lot of the 1600s was about was the sort of the youth of what some would call the Protestant Reformation. Let's just call it the Reformation. And religion wasn't really being reformed. It was just being changed around. And what everybody was saying is our way is right and everybody else is wrong. And unless you join us, we're going to kill you or shun you. And you think about that. Religions, the more modern religions, the Christianity and Islam, are religions that seem to want to make you become one of them. And if you're not one of them, you're wrong. Hinduism and Buddhism, founded much earlier, don't quite have that. They're not make converts, if you will. So just keep that in mind. And George Fox in the 1600s in England was trying to form something that wasn't trying to make converts, wasn't saying we're right and everybody else is wrong. What he was beginning to do was to reconnect with something that was very important in earlier Christianity, which was the contemplative way, sitting in silence and stillness, not so much paying attention to all the things that are going on in your mind, that sort of thing. Now, it wasn't the same as apophatic. We'll get to that in a little bit. But it was a little bit about sitting quietly and letting God work on you. And it was a response to the gloominess of the Puritans and the Puritan worldview, which was just, the world's a mess. And if we're going to fix any of it, we know how to fix it, which, of course, they didn't do. A lot of them just went over to so-called New World and eventually got rid of the Indians because they were in the way. We call them Native Americans, the ones who were here first. Well, think of this gloomy world view of the Puritans and the more optimistic attitude of a Quaker, who was not trying to make a convert, by the way. And look at it in terms of the modern day COVID situation, in which a lot of people say the world is a mess. We've got COVID, it's terrible, it's all going downhill. It's just yucky. And the last thing you would think of doing was sitting in silence and stillness and waiting for some inner light to inspire you. Well, leave it to the scientists to work on the vaccines and those medical, physical things. What we need to work on is the idea of what's going to go on within us so that we can have a better way of personally responding from a spiritual center to the problems and issues that are in the world today. This is what we want to keep in mind. So I think of Rufus in terms of Ignatius of Loyola, who was the founder of the Jesuits. Rufus was born during the Civil War, 1863, and he died in 1948. He was from Maine, by the way. And the reason I think of him in terms of Ignatius Loyola is they both had an injury that led to their reflection about, say, the meaning of life, which was a perfect example of the inner light entering into what looks like a terrible situation. Ignatius Loyola thought he was going to lose his leg. He was crippled at least a year. And he began to read about the lives of the saints. And it really changed his life from wanting to be a swashbuckling soldier killing people in war and moving to the founding of the Jesuits and bringing the love of Christ, the word, to the world, and so on. So what happens at 12, Rufus has a foot injury. And this foot injury lays him up, if you will, for a year. In other words, he can't be busy doing a lot of things. And that's what I said, I think, at the beginning of this talk. Could you just stop being so busy doing a lot of things? And sometimes you need to be hit over the head by maybe a coronavirus, I don't know, to just get you to quiet down, or a bad day of air so you don't go running all over the place. So he can't do stuff. And he lives on kind of a farm. It's a farm, or it's not a farm, not kind of a farm. So he's got all kinds of outdoor chores. Well, you can't do them. But it gives him a chance to reflect. What are you going to do? And he reflects about God, because he does come from a family that has some God focus. It helps. He reflected upon God, he reflected upon life and death at 12 years of age. And this began to move him. Now, of course, he wasn't saying at 12, oh, I've discovered the inner light, but it wasn't. He looks back, as many of us can look back on changes in our life, from, especially if they come from difficulties that we see only as a difficulty, to find out that there was a light in the midst of what seemed like complete darkness. So he's now reflecting as an adolescent from age 12. So one of the things they did as a family is after the family breakfast, they got a lot of chores to do, but they weren't going to focus their life on work only, all right? So as a boy, after family breakfast, they had a period of silent worship. Now, of course, for some of us, we'd say silence is not worship. The Quakers would. I would. We could use a little more silence in our worship and a little less talking and a little less singing. But that's just my opinion. So, and there was a felt sense, he said, a felt sense of a presence at 4 years of age. I think my first memories were when I was 4, and it certainly wasn't of a felt presence. Maybe a little bit older, but there was a felt presence. And he said it came from these little silent times the family had afterwards. The silence leads to an awareness. This is what can happen. Silence leads to awareness. It's as if the inner light, what I call God, is waiting, because God can hit you over the head with sudden enlightenment, but as if God is waiting for you to just stop and rest in the moment, which of course many of us can't do without earbuds on and noise and sounds. So he found later on, well, he found, because he did it as a family, but as time went on, reflecting on doing it as a family, and then the whole Quaker way, that they were all part of the Quakers, but what he began to find as he got a little older was that this silence is contagious if it's in a group. We often say that one of the reasons we get together with a group, because it's hard now with COVID to get together at all, but I think it even can, I mean, God can work on the internet, okay? You don't have to be physically with somebody uh, to make God function. So God can function on Zoom, I think. It's a matter of feeling the Zoom connection, if you will, with others. And then sitting in silence and stillness, each in front of your own little computers in home or wherever, you find it contagious. That is, you don't feel so silent yourself at the moment, but someone else in the Zoom meeting or in a meeting like the Quakers would have, or like you would have with a centering prayer group, the energy coming from their inner light, energizing them, flows over to you. And if you will, connects to your inner light, because God is all one. It's not, well, they're inner light and you're inner light, and you got two gods. No, not at all. It's the way God works. God works through us to reach out to one another. And so we've seen this. And so this is very much, so whenever you gather together in a, say, a centering prayer group, you're Quakers. Think of it, you're quaking. So it's contagious. The SOS people, they're the ones who are sponsoring this talk this morning in Knoxville, Tennessee. They don't have bad air like we do. They try to, they're seekers of silence. Before COVID, they would gather together and they would sit in silence for a certain period of time. And that helped build that community. So Rufus found intimate fellowship. That is, it's a kind of a centeredness with his innards, an intimate fellowship with the divine, to be what he would call the essence of mysticism. See, Quakers use the word mysticism, as everybody else does. That silence that he had, sitting there quietly without making noise, developed an intimate fellowship with what he called the divine, or the inner light. And he says that's it. That's the essence of mysticism, is to have that intimate fellowship. And he developed it in that silence and solitude. He found it to be life-changing. So you can't always be busy doing stuff, even though there's that sense of many cultures, stay busy. But he said that was what was life-changing. So I think of my own tradition. Where do we say is the real presence? We use that word, real presence. We say the Eucharist is real presence. That's where God is really present in my Catholic Christianity. Well, Rufus was to say real presence is the inner light. Now, his real presence, his experience of the real presence was life-changing. What I want to know is if Catholics receiving the Eucharist, if that's life-changing. And if it's life-changing, then how's it changing your life? I'll give you one way for the Quakers. If it's life-changing, they tend to reach out to a new person in the room. You receive the Eucharist in my church, you don't reach out to the stranger. You just don't do that. Let's face it, a lot of Catholicism is private religion. And it just is. I've seen too much of it to say that it's not. You say, no, I get together with your friends, with the people you already know and trust, with whom you feel safe, probably all whom agree with you. Or if they don't agree with you, you don't talk about things you disagree with. I think the Quakers are a big challenge in my religion. So, the Roman Catholic Church, my church at Trent, which was a big council called Trent, because that's where they met, Trent, Italy, way up in northern Italy. And as part of their, what was called the Counter-Reformation, the response to the Protestant critique, since we didn't want to talk to them, since they were wrong, we had to counter them. And one of the ways we did was emphasizing the real presence in the Eucharist, which wasn't a big issue about real or not real, because the Eucharist wasn't a big issue until the Protestants came along and began to challenge this kind of sense that we had. So, but even in the Counter-Reformation, we did not pick up on the contemplative tradition of earlier Christianity, which was all us. Earlier Christianity, it had been dropping away, and we got to start living in our heads and not enough in our hearts, where we would have definitely discovered a real presence. So we didn't develop, and neither did the Protestants develop, the contemplative outlook on things. When people look at the Quakers, if they could go into a room and look at the Quakers at one of their religious meetings, all sitting there in silence and solitude until somebody might stand up and speak, we think it's very strange, because Western religion is all about doing stuff. You go to a church and a Protestant or a Catholic, and they're all doing things, or somebody's doing something. Maybe the priest on the altar is doing something. And these Quakers are just sitting there. And we know this is very strange. And it's not very strange if you have a contemplative dimension to your life. And I think there was a contemplative dimension to the gospel. You know, with Jesus, it's all supposed to be based upon him. Jesus would go off to pray by himself, and he wasn't taking any books. There wasn't any light. He didn't have street light. And one of the disciples go after him and says, hey, what are you doing out here by yourself? People are looking for you. Come on, let's get busy. Very early on, Western religion is all about busyness. And the Quakers are not unbusy, but they don't do busy first. They do sit and center first. His first wife died, and we talked about Howard Thurman. His first wife died too. And then Howard Thurman married again, and so did Rufus. Now, Rufus' first wife died relatively early, and then his son Lowell died 40 years later. Now, did he abandon God? Did he abandon the inner light? No. And one of the reasons, I think, is because his prayer was not so petitionary. If your relationship with God is all about give me this, give me that, get me this, do that, a lot of people have given up on religion because they said they asked God for something and God didn't come through. So they said there's no God or I don't care. Because their whole lives was about God being, I don't know, Big Daddy in the sky to take care of your wants and, as you would say, your needs. But Rufus wasn't all about petitionary prayer. Sure, he wanted his son to live. Sure, he prayed for his wife to live. It didn't happen. But because he was connected to the inner light, he didn't give up. I think it's the only way to get through. And a lot of people leave religion because they're so lightly connected to it in the first place. So that was not his way. He was not just a petitionary believer. Now, of course, if you believe as he did in the inner light, God is always near. See, you don't have to ask God to show up. They don't sit there in their meetings saying, okay, God, waiting for you to come. They know God's here. What they're doing is trying to be present, which of course Thomas Keating would talk about. You don't get God to come, you get you to show up. And the first thing you do is physically show up. Then he would, often he said, he found the inner light during his reflections. He would find the beyond within, or the more, as you go. See, he's looking for the beyond within. There's another name. So if you don't like the word God, the beyond within, or the more would be another way. Addicts seek more to fill a hole in themselves. but it's the wrong way. And all recovery is seeking the more, the beyond within. And we're all in some sort of recovery from the addiction to noise, to busyness, to getting out there, to isolation in a way, to not trusting anybody, certainly not the stranger. Well, he became just a little bit more in his life. He became an editor of something called the Friends Review, and he taught in Philadelphia at a college, Haverford College. I'd heard of it. I had no idea that anything to do with Quakers, but he taught at the college. And the guy was educated. He was no dummy. And what he would say is, you encounter God in the everyday course of life. Now we're moving out from the silence and solitude. Now we're seeing the response to it. The response is that you encounter God in the everyday course of life. Well, who do you see in the everyday course of life? People you don't know, who you tend to avoid because you don't know them. And that's not what he's talking about. He says the everyday, that is, if I am looking out the window now and there's not a cloud sky, no shadow, because the sun can't, I feel like I'm Mars. And it's not as warm as it would otherwise be, because all this smoke is keeping the heat from getting in. Talk about end of the world encounters. Well, he would say this is the everyday course of life. This is what today is. Today is part of every day. Where do you find the inner light? Well, if I had no interior prayer life, I'd probably be pretty depressed about today. And not that I'm happy about it, but at the same time, I know there's more, the beyond within, as he would call it. So the result of his experience, this is very existential, Kierkegaard, his experience of the inner light gives him a new way to enter into, respond, and note the everyday course of life. And then you learn how to respond to the everyday in a new and deeper fashion. So it's not just a private encounter, if you will. You're not sitting, I'm not in the monastery to have my own private little encounter with God in my meditation and then just be oblivious to the rest of the world. If I wouldn't be doing this. I wouldn't even be making any attempt to teach on Zoom. I make no attempt whatsoever. Oh, by the way, an aside, this is the book, Rufus Jones. Look at this, how skinny that book is. It's put out by Orbis Press. It's the essential writings of Rufus Jones. Actually, that's what it looks like. Okay, nice guy, right? Orbis Press. We got it in our bookstore. If you're coming here from Roaring Fork Valley to Mass tomorrow when I'm preaching, by the way, I hope there should be a huge crowd. No, I don't think so. So it's not just a private encounter with God that just stays so you can best continue to live in your gated communities or whatever. So I'm not here to escape. If I'm here to escape, there's going to be no transformation. I'm sure of that. So he says, right out of Meister Eckhart, Dominican, mid-1300s, 500 years earlier here. Meister Eckhart says we all have a grunt or a spark, the divine spark within. So Rufus says all creation sparks with God's presence. But wait a second, this creation that's outside there, that's got full of smoke, it sparks. Now, spark's not a good thing when you got a lot of fires. So I don't know if that's a good word today, but expand your horizons when I think of spark, an interior spark, which should fire us up, not to destroy, but to warm a cold world, if you will, a cold at heart world. So all creation sparks with God's presence, he said, which includes all people. Boy, talk about a response to racism. All creation sparks with God's presence. That's very optimistic. You're not going to be able to get that, much less hold on to it in your daily encounters, because unless you've got an inner spiritual life, because people are going to be nasty, things are not going to go your way, and you've got to say, "Oh, that person is acting like an idiot in some ways, but they're the spark of God's light." You somehow see something of light, and as they're surrounded by their own little darkness. And this, of course, can open you to our modern focus on ecology. I don't know that he was thinking about that. So you look at nature and you say, this is holy. It's not to be nominated and used so I can get more stuff. We are one with nature. This would be be Meister Eckhart, it'd be Rufus Jones. We're one with nature, so we have to respond to it in a certain way. And we have to take care of the land. And I think that's in the kind of Quaker mentality. Take care of the land, not destroy it. You could use his kind of spiritual way to look at the world around you and to the importance of our work time taking care of the world around us. Now, what would this make him like? If all creation sparked with God's presence, this would make him like Henry David Thoreau. We talked about Thoreau. Make him like Francis of Assisi, like Francis I, the present Pope. Like Julian of Norwich, there's another one that was into ecology. Hundreds of years ago, these people are concerned about nature because they see the spark of life in everything, not just in a host. So he says, nature has a deep down spiritual essence called the spiritual overworld. There was a book, I think, called Overworld, something like that. And it was all about trees. And what it said, a lot of trees are being burnt down in the West, and we've got their smoke. Overworld talks about trees. And the thing is that the tree underground, where you can't see, the roots are really, if you were talking to one another, they're interconnecting with one another, feeding with it. Overstory. Thank you, Liz. The overstory. You think of over, but it's really what's going on underneath. That nourishes a sick tree, nourishes another tree. But also, when you see these trees all fall down or burn up, you say, "Oh, it's destroyed." Underneath, not destroyed. In other words, this spark of life, this inner life, is literally in the soil. God made the world, by the way. I mean, I think Genesis would agree with me. God made the world, or what you might call the beyond within, made the world, and is got an energy in it. So we try to destroy it, that we'll probably destroy ourselves first. I hope not. And the world will just adjust itself without us. I like that idea. And he calls it about the spiritual overworld. It's really about an interior something that's going on. And I thought that was Overstory. I thought it was a very good book, by the way. I didn't know all that about trees. I'm much more hopeful about nature in spite of all the stuff we do to it. Now, as Meister Eckhart would say, and he was a great mystic, great contemplative. He said, we all carry a spark of the divine within us. So that's not by baptism. The trouble with some of our religions is it says the only way to get it is through our methods. And so it's as if, say, if you get baptized, you get this. And if you don't get baptized, you don't get it. Rufus is very much interfaith, which is why they don't try so hard to proselytize. It's not so much about we're right, you're wrong. Contemplative is not much about we're right, you're wrong, because that's just not where they are. They're interconnected. So we all carry this spark of divine life within us, all of us, from the get-go. It's a matter of discovering it. So you don't believe in God? Doesn't make God go away. The beyond within is still here. And what happens with so many people when they don't have any faith, don't have any practice, is they try to find something to fill what can only be filled by our attentiveness to, I think, the silence and the solitude. So in a sense, the beyond within, God, this presence, in creation, makes all reality sacramental. I love that. I think I made that up. All reality is sacramental. No, I'm sure Rufus said it. So we use that word sacramental. In other words, what do you mean by sacrament? It's not just the 7 ones we have in the Roman Catholic Church, but sacramental is everywhere, all creation. So we keep that in mind. We're so interconnected. And therefore, he says this, the soul, he speaks about soul, the inner life, the soul is not depraved from original sin. This has ramifications because a lot of people think, believe, act as if work is a torture. And the most important thing to do is not work. The whole class system of England, for instance, and I'm sure other cultures, is a gentleman is called a gentleman because he doesn't work. His minions do the work. He collects rent on lands that have been inherited, owned. Well, a lot of that has gone by the boards, but still, you still got this idea that work, what you want to do is escape work. You don't want to work. And he says, no. Even work can have a sacramental quality to it. It's not it's not a punishment, if you will. It's part of your spiritual formation. So I think of, I'll just take my life here at the monastery. There's a certain amount of work that we do here. Mine seems to be a lot in the kitchen. But it's not a labor that you want to get over with so you can get back to reading your spiritual books and meditating. But that because of the meditation, the silence and solitude times, because of that, you begin to see work as something that nourishes your spiritual life. Why? Is it less hard? Your attitude changes. And attitude is so important in what we do. You want to whine and feel sorry for yourself, it'll feel like a punishment. But the people who practice silence and solitude are not whiners, except rare instances like myself. But most people are just not whiners. They get through that and they see work as something to feed us. So he wants to, because of his own experience, he wants to make sure that Quakerism is not all about social justice or pacifism, He wants to make sure that it goes back to its original emphasis, which is the interior journey. That's the key. And this is what I think a lot of the contemplative teachers today are doing in my tradition, is trying to get us back to the sort of our original emphasis was the interior journey. Even when Jesus sent out his disciples, when they came back, because they were not enough interior journey, all they want to do is talk about their successes. He said, come on, let's go away and be quiet for a while. Let's just get away and be quiet still. He keeps trying to get them. And when he goes off to pray, he's trying to get them to, he's trying to model something for them, although they don't get it. Right away, they don't get it. So the original emphasis is the interior. That's the key for Quakerism. From that comes any kind of social justice behavior that they have in the world. Because in the interior, you have the experience, one-on-one encounter with the divine, and that's what's going to energize you. Not some priest at the pulpit telling you should be concerned about the ecology of the world. They'll say, yeah. And you go out and you live your life the way you always do. Because it's very hard to change from our little self-centered worlds. I know from personal experience. I'm not putting you down. I'm definitely dealing with myself. So the Quaker simple life is what he saw as early Christianity before all the doctrines and institutions came along. Now, I'm not saying there's something the matter with doctrines or institutions, but it's when they become primary, that is, preserve the church over against anything, scandal, whatever, preserve the church's reputation. The institution becomes central, and we stop living out the gospel. Doctrines become central, and then we start killing people who don't agree with us, shunning them, ignoring them. When the spark of life is everywhere, not only in each person, but in all of nature. So we've gone more to an emphasis on organization, to our head. Not open to our heads, got it away from our hearts. And then from that, there will be service to one's fellows. So it's not private religion, you and Jesus. It has very much a social dimension, and that's where you'll very much see the Quakers involved in social justice. And okay, so they're not for war, but they don't just sit back and say, I'm not in that war. They get involved in, well, after World War II and the destruction, they got very involved in trying to help rebuild war-torn Europe. Before the Marshall Plan, the Quakers were trying to do this. They saw the destruction of war, and they tried to respond to that destructiveness. And it all came out of their prayer. As a matter of fact, during World War I, they founded the American Friends Service, 1917. That was just about the time we were getting involved in World War I. And it was a committee to resist violence and injustice. So they wanted to resist war, but they wanted to resist injustice, the injustice that came out of wars, the destructiveness, and try to respond to this. So their alternative to military service was action, economic and humanitarian, not just sitting back. So, oh, you pacifists, you don't do anything. You don't care about your country. They care. They don't not only care about their country, they care about the world. I'm going to end with this for the moment. He got the Nobel Peace Prize in 1947, by the way, and he met Gandhi in 1926. He met Gandhi. But let's stop the talk at this time. I think, Chris, don't we take a break, and then Ed or Teresa, don't we do a 20-minute sit or not? What's up?
Yeah, that's up to Teresa. Usually we do a 10-minute break and then we do a.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, that's okay. I was just going to say, yes, we'll take a 10-minute break and then come back and go into silence.
Okay. All right. For those of you who are various parts of the country, we're going to take a 10-minute break And, oh, and we'll put up there how you can support me so I don't end up in debtor's prison needing the Quakers to come get me out. You can send it to my Venmo account, which is Terry-Ryan-24. Send a check here to the monastery addressed to me. And those two things will be put up by Christopher. Okay, we'll take 10 minutes, and we're going to go back and do a little attention to the inner light. Okay.
Oh no, not again. Okay, Danny. You walk out. Yeah, now, now wait a minute. At my bed, you're playing on. Danny. Danny. No drop guy. Drop guy. Oh, I think that outside. Out in the
Are we back yet? I'm back.
I'm back.
Okay. Is time? I lost track. Christopher, are you
It is
back?
time.
Are you at home?
I'm at home.
You're at home. Okay. I thought you were in the bookstore. All right. I'm on my iPad. That's why it works. It doesn't seem to work on my computer.
Yeah, my internet's bad here too.
I told Charlie he thinks it's the weather.
Yeah, I looked it up. The weather can cause it. So
Yeah. So,
I think it's the weather too.
all right. And you know, with the bad weather, we're having more people. That's what's going to happen with COVID. More and more people are going to go back on Zoom because they're not so busy running around doing things.
That's
It's-
good. You can flush them out.
It's true.
It's terrible to think that my audience grows with disaster.
That's a good marketing strategy.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And Mary is going to keep the time clock.
Do you want me to?
Well, who else?
Gladly.
You got the nice gong, right? I don't know, unless Teresa's got other ideas.
I have a gong, but how about when we come back, we'll hear the gong and then we'll just say in our Father together. Doesn't matter. We'll try that. Can we try that?
Do that one again.
Just when we finish the 20 minutes,
Yeah.
ring the gong and then just say in our Father together. I don't know how that would work on Zoom, but it's a nice way to transition from a deep space back into conversation, I think.
It works if only one person is unmuted.
Thank you.
If
Mary.
everybody tries to speak at the same time,
It's
Zoom
awful.
is not timed. It will be chaos.
Okay, good thought, Mary. Do you want to lead once you finish the gong,
Yeah.
or I could do it? You want to do it? Good.
I'll be
Okay,
glad to.
that'll be awesome. Thanks.
All right. Is it time yet?
Yep, it is.
All right. Well, welcome back, everybody. It's good to have you all back. And what we do now with Seekers of Silence sponsoring this talk is to take 20 minutes to meditate. And Mary will hit a gong to start and a gong to finish. And if you would please mute yourself now, as I'm going to do in a second, so that Mary is the only one who is making sounds in the next 20 minutes. Okay, Mary, take over.
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory. Amen.
Okay, as you're ready, just open your eyes and we'll return. Now, this is the time when, oh, I see a chat. This is the time when we do a little question and answer. And you can put something in the chat where you can just unmute and speak out. So this is our little Q&A time based upon what I've been talking about. For those who wanted to know what my address is or what my Venmo account is, that's in the chat. Okay, thanks, Christopher. So we'll see. Got any questions? Okay, we don't have any questions, or maybe we'll come up with something as we're going along. I'm just going to talk a little bit more before I end my presentation. And it seems that since SOS is not in person, unless they're going to continue to chat on this, I don't know. Any case, I ended up with his traveling meet Mohandas Gandhi. Now remember that Howard Thurman met Mahatma Gandhi as well. And so it seems like that's just one of the things that people like to do. Here's a question. There is so much more about Rufus Jones. Are you going to do a part 2? Yes, I'm going to do a part 2. I'm going to do a part 3. I'm going to do a part 4, if you will, and each has a different theme. And when am I going to do that, you might ask? Well, I'm going to do it the first Saturday of September, October, and November. And each of those Saturdays will start at our special time, 8:30 a.m. Mountain Time. I barely get out of my jammies, but I'm ready at 8:30 Mountain Time, 10:30 East Coast Time, 7:30 on the West Coast. So I doubt my sister Jane is listening. She's probably still in bed. But so, yes, there's a lot more about Rufus Jones, and you're going to be getting a lot more of it. So not to worry that I'm cutting them short. A lot to say there. So what I want to emphasize for today, especially, is what I think connects so many of these mystics is what Rufus would call the inner light, the within, if you will, the beyond within, the more. He keeps trying to find words, as does anybody, the spark. And what we'll get into more is how it connected the Quakers to their response to the world around them, the world in which they live, not only in an ecological sense, but in a restorative justice, you might call social justice, in looking at the mess and not just decrying the mess, but saying, what can we do to fix things up? Again, they started this with World War I. I mean, sort of a more organized committee, because war destroys things. And World War I didn't end much of anything. because they had to have a World War II. Then there was the Cold War. There's one war or another going on, and we don't seem to be able to solve too much. But we have wars. I'm not going to debate that one way or the other. And their response, what was their response to war? Not that they would join up to the military, but that they would try to restore what was damaged and broken, financially and personally. And so that is, I think, a very important thing to take with you when you think it all started out with a bunch of people sitting in a room saying nothing. And until, you have this sense, well, then somebody stands up and says something. And where do they get that from? And I will add something that we'll pick up on next week. He was not an apophatic. He was not in a centering prayer. When I say silence and stillness, I don't mean you make your mind blank, because he wasn't into that. In other words, he thought that the human person was basically good, and they had a lot of good thoughts in their mind, but we just had to sort of sort out what we're going to pay attention to and what we're not. And I think that's a part of the wisdom of the Quakers. They were neither apophatic nor cataphatic. They neither focused on one thing or no thing. He actually had a very optimistic attitude about human nature, amazingly so, you might say, especially in the 20th century when he lived through 2 world wars. But I'll end with this, his idea. This is a quote from him, not Gandhi. He says, what he saw in the Indian mysticism, again, this is not an attempt to convert people to a particular religious path. He didn't think Gandhi was about that. He says he sees in Gandhi's Indian mysticism the inmost being of oneself with the inmost reality in the universe. He saw that connection. The inmost being of oneself with the inmost reality in the universe was connected. So our inmost being of oneself is basically quite good. He continues, he says, keep in tow individual aims and selfish desires so that the stream of life is pure. So what gets in the way? Selfishness and rampant individualism, we call it today. It's all about me. This guy died in 1949 before we were talking anything about rampant individualism, about it's all about me. I'm worried about me. I don't go out to a lot of things that I might go out to if I was living alone, because I live with other people. And I have to be careful with this COVID thing. I live with other people. And so I feel responsible. My personal actions could redound upon their health. A lot of people don't live that way. They say, I want to do what I want to do. Heck with you. I don't think they're Quakers. So you want to keep in tow that sense of individual freedom. You also have individual obligations because we live in community. That's why it's called a society. Quakers are called society. They don't necessarily call themselves Quakers, if you will. So you want the stream of life to be pure, and you got to get your selfishness and it's all about you out of the way. So his sense was God's truth and love will flow through that soul in which the stream is pure, and it will energize you. Well, I thank you all for paying attention today. Now, I want to remind you that this talk is being recorded, so you can tell your friends that this is recorded. We will continue with this theme the next 3 first Saturdays. Now, I am going to be talking, Christopher, when am I talking again?
That will be August
Next week?
17th. Oh, next week, August 10th. That's right.
I think I'm talking next week and the week after. Yeah, Berdiev. Berdiev, I think I'm doing next week. We're picking up on that on the 14th and then the 28th. Okay,
Yeah, 14th to the 28th. That's right.
Yeah. 14th and the 28th. Those are at 9 a.m. I get to rest a little. That's 9 a.m. Mountain Time. So the East Coast people have to wait till 11 their time. Okay, thank you very much. And we thank you all for
Thank you.
tuning in. Oh, someone says I'm on page 50 in the book. How far should I read for the next time? Well, I mean, if you read another 50 pages, you're close to the end. I would read till, get to about page 100. You'll be fine. You'll be fine. Okay. All right. Take care. Bye-bye. And thank you, Christopher.
Thank you, Father Terry.
You're welcome. Thank you, SOS. We'll see you later.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, everybody. We'll have this on probably tonight on snowmassbookstore.com. It'll be on our YouTube channel. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Chris.